I still remember the first thing she said to me. Not the words, exactly, just the way her voice moved. Low, unhurried, like someone who had stopped rushing years ago and refused to start again. And maybe that's why I noticed her before I even understood why I kept looking up from my notebook every few seconds. She was standing by the doorway of the small cafe, brushing the rain from her hair with the back of her hand. The kind of gesture that shouldn't mean anything. But she made it look delicate, almost intentional, as if the moment needed softening and she knew how to do it. Her eyes met mine for half a second, long enough to feel like she saw more than she should have, short enough to pretend nothing happened. I tried to look away first. I failed. She walked past me, the faint scent of something warm, maybe jasmine, maybe just the rain on her coat, trailing behind her. I forced myself to breathe normally. Ridiculous how a single step could rearrange the air between two strangers. When she reached the counter, the barista greeted her by name. "Late night again?" She laughed lightly, a laugh that sounded practiced and real at the same time. "Seems like it." Her age wasn't the first thing I noticed about her, but the way she carried it, confident, but with a quietness in her shoulders that suggested she'd learned certain lessons the hard way. She looked like someone who had lived long enough to understand people, and long enough to be tired of pretending she didn't. I pretended to read. Mostly, I just listened to the way her bracelets clinked softly when she reached for her cup. She sat 2 tables away. Close enough for me to see the faint line between her brows when she concentrated on something on her phone. Close enough that when she shifted, her knee brushed the wooden leg of my chair, and my breath tripped for a moment. I should have said something then. A simple, "Sorry," maybe. But the way she paused, just for a second, made it feel like saying anything would break the spell of whatever this was. So I stayed quiet. She did too. Minutes slipped by with strange tension, like we were both pretending not to feel the gravity pulling our attention back to each other. When she finally looked over, it wasn't accidental. Her gaze lingered, steady, curious, maybe even assessing. "You're here late," she said. It took me a beat too long to answer. "Yeah. Couldn't focus at home." She nodded, as if she understood more than I said. Her fingers tapped the side of her cup, slow, rhythmic. "Some nights are like that." There was space in her voice, space for me to step into the conversation if I wanted. I did. But my throat tightened anyway. "Do you come here often?" I asked, hating how rehearsed it sounded. Her lips curved, not quite a smile. "Most nights." Her eyes flicked down to my notebook. "You write?" "Trying to," I muttered, suddenly self-conscious about the half-finished sentences on the page. She shifted her chair slightly, closer, but just enough to pretend it wasn't intentional. The soft scrape of wood on tile was louder than it should have been. "Well," she said, brushing a strand of damp hair behind her ear, "you look like someone with a lot on his mind." Something warm tightened in my chest. Maybe recognition. Maybe trouble. Before I could reply, the front door of the cafe swung open sharply, cold air rushing in. She glanced at the door, then back at me, eyes widening, like she knew something was about to change. "Wait," she whispered. And that's when I realized someone had stepped inside, and her expression wasn't calm anymore. The door slammed harder than it needed to, and the sound jolted both of us. A couple hurried in, laughing too loudly, shaking off umbrellas. Nothing dramatic. Nothing dangerous. But she exhaled like she'd been holding something heavy inside her chest, and the tension around her eyes softened again. "Sorry," she murmured. "I thought, never mind." She tried to hide it, but the way her fingers tightened around her cup said enough. I didn't ask. I wasn't sure she would answer. She stood, walked toward the counter for a napkin, then hesitated, and turned toward my table instead. "Mind if I sit here?" she asked, already lowering herself into the chair across from me. I shook my head. "Not at all." Up close, the faint lines at the edge of her eyes looked softer than I expected, earned, not aged. And for a moment, I wondered who had made her flinch at nothing, or who she hoped wouldn't walk through that door. She noticed me watching too closely and looked away, pretending to adjust her bracelet. "It's been a long week," she said quietly. "You don't have to explain." Her lips pressed together. "I know. But it's strange. I don't usually talk to strangers." I almost laughed. "I'm not exactly a natural at this either." Her eyes lifted to mine, warmer now. Strange we're doing it anyway. There it was, that pull again. I felt it under my ribs, subtle but insistent. She traced the rim of her cup with her thumb. "I was married once," she said, voice steady but careful. "A long time ago. And I didn't quite recover from how it ended." I didn't interrupt. Something in her expression made it clear interruptions were what she'd endured too many of. After a moment, she continued, "People expect you to move on efficiently. As if grief has a schedule." She gave a small, humorless smile. Mine didn't. She wasn't asking for pity. She was offering a piece of herself, something quiet and real. I nodded, unsure if words would cheapen it. "And you?" she asked softly. "Anyone waiting for you? Messages you should be answering?" I shook my head. "No. I've dated, but I think loneliness feels different when you're still figuring out who you are." I paused. "Sometimes you meet people who make the rest feel louder." Her gaze lingered on me, searching for something she didn't say out loud. "That's risky," she murmured, feeling anything too strongly. Her hand rested on the table, close enough that the heat of her skin reached mine. I didn't touch her. But I didn't pull away either. "You don't seem afraid of risk," I said. She gave a soft laugh, quiet, breathy, the kind you only hear when someone lets their guard slip. "Oh, I'm terrified," she whispered. "I'm just tired of pretending I'm not." For a second, either of us moved. The rain tapped against the window, steady and rhythmic, filling the space between our breaths. I felt the pull again, magnetic, gentle, undeniable. Then she shifted closer, her knee brushing mine under the table. Not accidental this time. "Tell me your name," she said, her voice barely above a murmur. When I said it, she repeated it slowly, like she wanted to memorize the shape of it. Her fingers grazed the back of my hand, light, cautious, lingering longer than necessary. Not a mistake. Not a slip. A choice. And the air between us tightened, warm and electric, like the beginning of something neither of us was supposed to want, but both of us were already reaching for. Her fingers were still lightly touching mine when the cafe door chimed again. We both straightened instinctively, the moment snapping taut. A group of students walked in, laughing, one of them glancing in our direction before scanning for empty tables. Her hand slipped back to her lap. Too quickly. Too practiced. I felt something uncomfortable twist in my chest, like guilt, but not mine. "You okay?" I murmured. She nodded, though her eyes stayed fixed on her coffee. "Just habit. People see what they want to see. People judge what they don't understand," I said before I thought it through. She looked up sharply, something flickering in her expression. "Exactly." The students settled somewhere behind us, their chatter filling the space where our silence now sat. She leaned slightly forward, lowering her voice. "This is complicated," she said. "More than I realized." I swallowed. "Because of the age difference?" Her breath caught barely, but I noticed. "That. And everything that comes with it." She didn't need to explain. I could feel the tension rolling off her, not shame, exactly, but the weight of being seen through a lens she never asked for. Before I could respond, her phone vibrated sharply against the table. She flinched. The name flashing across the screen made her exhale sharply, almost frustrated. A woman's name. Short. Familiar. She didn't answer, just flipped the phone face down with a controlled breath. "Everything okay?" I asked carefully. "She worries," she said, brushing her hair back though it didn't need fixing. "She thinks I should be more careful. With people. People like me?" Her eyes softened at the edges. "She doesn't know you. But she'd still say yes." A beat passed. 2. Something heavy settled between us, either of us willing to push it away. You don't have to explain yourself, I whispered. I know, she whispered back. That's what scares me. Her knee brushed mine again, unintentional this time, or maybe she let it happen. I couldn't tell. The closeness was enough to blur logic. Enough to make my pulse trip. Her gaze dropped to my mouth for half a second, so quick she might have gotten away with it if I hadn't been watching her as closely as she watched me. She inhaled, slow, steady, deliberate. I leaned in without meaning to. She didn't move. For a moment, everything else dimmed, the laughter behind us, the rain outside, the glow of the hanging lights. It was just the warmth of her breath brushing my cheek, the subtle perfume lingering in the air, the soft tremble in her fingers where they rested near mine. Her lips parted, just slightly. But before anything could happen, someone called her name from across the room. We both froze. A man stood near the entrance, waving awkwardly, clearly surprised to see her. Middle-aged. Familiar with her in the way acquaintances are, close enough to recognize, not close enough to assume. She masked her reaction instantly, straightening, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I didn't expect him here, she whispered, forcing a smile. He knows you? I asked quietly. He works with me. Sort of. And he loves to talk. The implication stung more than it should have. The man hesitated, then began walking toward us. She acted before I could breathe, her hands sliding under the table, fingers brushing mine in a quick, urgent squeeze. Don't say anything, she murmured. Not yet. Her touch lingered, warm, intimate, a promise and a warning in one. And for the first time, resisting her felt impossible. The moment her colleague approached our table, her hand slipped away from mine as if burned, yet her knee stayed pressed against my leg under the table, a contradiction she didn't correct. He chatted briefly, too casually, too curious. She smiled through it, but her fingers drummed an uneven rhythm on her cup, betraying every calm line on her face. When he finally left, offering a parting wave, the silence he left behind felt loud enough to crack open. She didn't meet my eyes at first. She just exhaled, long and shaky, her shoulders lifting and falling as if she'd been holding them tense for hours. I'm sorry, she murmured. For what? My voice sounded lower than I meant. For how that must have looked. She swallowed, staring at the window. I shouldn't have panicked. You didn't panic, I said. You reacted. She finally looked at me, and the look wasn't soft this time. It was raw, unguarded in a way I hadn't seen before. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed again. Maybe I reacted because I care too much about what people think. A beat. Then another. I leaned forward, elbows resting on my knees. Or because you care what I think. Her breath hitched, just slightly, but enough to shift the entire air between us. She didn't deny it. Instead, she whispered, You're younger. People will talk. They'll assume things. Her voice tightened. And the worst part is, I'll let them hurt me if I let this happen. But you still want it, I said quietly. Her silence answered for her. I reached out slowly, not touching her yet, just letting my hand hover. She watched it, watched me, watched the space between us like it was a cliff edge. I shouldn't, she whispered. I know, I said. She didn't pull back when my fingertips brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. It felt like touching a fuse, tiny, electric, dangerous. Her eyes closed at the contact, and she leaned the smallest fraction into my palm. You're going to make this harder, she breathed. It was already hard, I murmured. Her eyes opened again, and this time, nothing guarded them. Desire, fear, longing, they all flickered at once, tangled and intense. You don't understand, she whispered, voice trembling. I haven't let anyone close in years. Not like this. Not this close. She pulled in a shaky breath, her hand rising as if to push mine away, then stopping halfway, fingers curling instead around my wrist. Her touch was warm, tentative, possessive in a way she probably didn't intend. "I don't know how to navigate this," she said. "Then let me meet you halfway." Her lips parted. Not a word, just a breath that felt like one. She leaned in without realizing it, her forehead almost touching mine. Her voice dropped, barely a whisper. "I've been thinking about you," she confessed, each word slow, careful. "More than I should. More than is smart." My heart thudded once, hard. "I think about you too," I said. Her fingers slid up my wrist, resting against my pulse like she was feeling how fast it raced. We were close, too close. The kind of close where a slight movement would end the space between us. Her breath warmed my cheek. Her body leaned into mine, tentative but undeniable. "Tell me to stop," she whispered, though her lips were already near mine. "I can't," I breathed. Her hand tightened. And just as her lips brushed the corner of my mouth, a sharp knock on the cafe window shattered the moment. She froze. I froze. The world paused. Someone was standing outside, looking directly at us. The knock against the window wasn't loud, but it hit her like a shout. She jerked back so fast her chair scraped against the floor. I turned just in time to see the figure outside lower their hand and stare at her through the glass. A woman. Older than me, younger than her. Sharp eyes. Concern twisted into suspicion. The same name that flashed on her phone earlier. She whispered it under her breath, barely audible. "Oh no!" Before I could speak, the door opened, a gust of cold air rushing in with her. "Why aren't you answering?" the woman demanded, not loud, but intense enough to pull every pair of eyes in the cafe. She didn't spare me more than a glance, but even that glance lingered too long, assessing, piecing together what she'd walked in on. My pulse kicked hard. Hers must have too. Her hand trembled as she tucked her hair behind her ear. "I was busy," she murmured. The woman's gaze slid back to me. Clearly. Something in her tone made heat rise up my neck. Not shame, just the realization that whatever this was between us wasn't as hidden as we'd convinced ourselves. "She's just a friend," she started to explain, voice too quick, too tight. The woman raised a brow. "A friend." Her eyes flicked from our chairs, still too close, to our hands, still resting nearer than strangers would allow. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. "You're lying," she said flatly. Her breath hitched. "I'm not." But she was. I felt it. Saw it. And the woman did too. Before I could speak, the woman stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You told me you weren't ready to let anyone in. You told me you were still healing. And now I walk in and—" she gestured between us. "This?" Her shoulders stiffened at the accusation, and something inside her cracked, something small but real. "This is different," she whispered. "Different how?" the woman demanded. Silence. She didn't move, but I felt her leaning toward me, emotionally if not physically, like she needed grounding. Her hand slid just slightly toward mine again, almost unconsciously, then froze halfway. The woman noticed. Her eyes widened. "You care about him." It wasn't a question. My breath stuck. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked at me, really looked, and something terrified flickered across her face. She wasn't afraid of the woman. She was afraid of admitting the truth in front of her. The woman exhaled sharply. "If you're going to do this, at least be honest. Don't hide behind me. Don't pretend nothing's happening." A long, trembling silence. Then the woman stepped back, giving her one last look, hurt, resigned, not angry, something worse. "I hope you know what you're doing," she said. "Because if you fall, he won't catch you lightly." She left before either of us could respond. The door shut. The cafe quieted. The world narrowed to just us. She stayed frozen for a moment, staring at the door. Her hands trembled openly now, no longer hidden. When I reached toward her, she didn't pull away, but she didn't move closer either. "She didn't lie," she whispered finally. "I told her I wasn't ready. I told her I couldn't give anyone hope. And then you. Her voice cracked. You walked into my life like you were already inside it. My chest tightened. So tell me to stop. And I will. She looked up, eyes shining, not with tears, but with fear and want tangled together. I can't, she breathed. And that's the problem. Then she stood, too quickly, brushing past me. Her hip grazed my shoulder, warm, unsteady, leaving electricity in its wake. We have to talk, she said. Somewhere private. A decision. A point of no return. Come with me. The night felt unusually quiet, as if everything outside their little world had finally stopped pushing, pulling, or reminding them of what they weren't supposed to feel. The lamps were dim, casting a warm amber glow across the room, softening the edges of everything, including the fears they'd carried for so long. She stood near him, arms loosely folded, like she was holding herself together only out of habit. He knew that posture now. He'd learned it the way someone learns a favorite song, slowly, carefully, until every note made sense. Can we just talk? She asked, her voice gentler than he expected. Almost tired. Not of him, of hesitation. He nodded, stepping closer. Not too close, but close enough that he could feel the warmth from her, the quiet pull that always felt like gravity. For the first time, either of them pretended it wasn't there. She looked down, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I was scared, she admitted. Not because of you. Because of how easy it is to care about you. She laughed softly, embarrassed by her own honesty. I kept telling myself it was wrong. The age difference, what people might think, all of it. He swallowed, feeling a tightness in his chest loosen at last. I thought I was imagining everything. That maybe I wanted too much. Or read too much into the way you looked at me. Her eyes lifted to his, slow, steady, unguarded. I looked at you like that because I felt it. All of it. There was a pause, one of those long, fragile moments where the room could tilt either way. He took a quiet breath and reached out, his hand brushing her arm lightly, not claiming, not assuming. Just asking. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into the touch, her shoulder softening beneath his fingers. People will talk, she whispered. They always do. His voice was low, close. But they don't get to live this moment. We do. A small smile touched her lips, the kind that only appears when someone finally lets themselves exhale. She stepped closer, closing the space between them until he could feel her breath lift the air between them. It wasn't a kiss. It didn't need to be. It was presence, closeness, acceptance. Her head rested lightly against his chest, and his hand rose instinctively to the back of her shoulder, holding her with a gentleness that said more than words could. Everything they'd feared felt smaller now, quieter, like background noise fading out. After a long, quiet moment, she murmured, So, what happens now? He tilted his forehead to hers, a soft, intimate touch that felt more real than anything they tried to hide. No, he said. We stop pretending we don't want the same thing. Her fingers intertwined with his, slow and deliberate. No rush. No hiding. Just the simple truth of choosing each other. The night settled around them, warm and still, as they stood together at last, not perfect, not certain, but emotionally steady in a way they hadn't been before. Whatever came next, they would face it together.